The moment my husband walked through the freshly painted front door of my condo and tossed a key, my key, the one I'd had cut 5 years ago at the hardware store on Maple Street, to his mother, something inside me went completely still. Not the panicked kind of still, not the frozen in shock kind, the calm kind. The kind that only comes when you already know what's about to happen, because you spent 3 weeks making sure it would. "There's room for everyone," Garrett said, spreading his arms wide like he was unveiling a prize on a game show. "Don't be so greedy, Diane." And I smiled. I smiled so wide that his mother, Connie, actually looked confused for a second, because those were the exact words I had been waiting to hear all morning. But let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand what this condo meant to me, what I poured into it, and exactly who Garrett Holloway turned out to be. I'm Diane. I'm 51 years old, and I've spent the last 23 years working as a medical receptionist at a small family practice in Clover Ridge, Tennessee. Clover Ridge is the kind of town where everybody knows your car, your mother's maiden name, and approximately how much you paid for your house. Population just under 9,000, one stoplight, a diner that's been serving the same chicken biscuit since 1987. I love it. I genuinely love it, which is why I never left, even when leaving might have been the smarter move. I bought my condo back when I was 44, right after my first marriage ended quietly and without drama. It was a ground-floor unit in a 2-story building on Clover Ridge's east side. Nothing fancy, but mine. 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a kitchen with a window that faced the little courtyard where somebody had planted a dogwood tree years ago. In the spring, that tree bloomed so pink it almost looked fake. I used to drink my coffee standing at that window before work every morning, and for a long time that was enough. That was genuinely enough. I met Garrett in the spring of 2019 at a church potluck I almost didn't go to. He was a contractor, or said he was, broad-shouldered, easy laugh, the kind of man who calls older women ma'am and means it. He was 53 at the time, divorced, 2 grown kids from his first marriage who lived out of state. He'd moved to Clover Ridge 8 months earlier to be closer to his mother, Connie, who lived in the apartment complex on Birch Avenue. That part I thought was sweet. I really did. We dated for almost a year. He was attentive in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. He fixed the leaking faucet in my bathroom on our 3rd date without being asked. He brought me soup when I had a sinus infection in February. He remembered that I took my coffee with oat milk, not regular, and he kept a carton of it in his own refrigerator just for when I came over. Little things. Calculated little things, I know now, but at the time they felt like being genuinely cared for. We got married in June of 2020, small ceremony, just a few co-workers and my sister Paulette and her husband. Garrett moved into my condo. His contribution was a couch I didn't really like and a flat-screen TV that was 2 years old. I didn't make anything of it. We were building something together, I told myself. The specifics of who brought what didn't matter. The first year was fine. The second year was fine. By the 3rd year, I started noticing things I'd been explaining away. Garrett didn't work consistently. He'd have a good month, pick up a bathroom renovation here, a deck project there, and then go 6 or 8 weeks with nothing, and somehow it was always a story. The client backed out. The weather delayed everything. The supplier messed up the order. There was always a reason, and the reasons always sounded just plausible enough that I didn't push. But I was covering the mortgage. I was covering utilities. I was covering groceries most of the time. On a medical receptionist's salary in a small Tennessee town, that math gets tight fast. What I didn't see coming, what I genuinely did not see coming, was Connie. Garrett's mother was 69 when I met her, a small, sharp-eyed woman with silver hair she kept in a braid and a habit of showing up unannounced. She lived directly above Garrett's ex-girlfriend, which I only mention because it tells you something about how Connie operated. She liked to be close to things. She liked to observe. She and I were cordial for the first couple of years. Birthday cards, holiday dinners, the occasional Sunday afternoon visit. She called me Hun, in a way that was warm on the surface and somehow dismissive underneath. I couldn't ever quite pin it down, so I let it go. Then, in the fall of our 4th year of marriage, Connie's landlord sold the Birch Avenue complex to a developer. Everyone got notice. She had 60 days to find somewhere else to go. I remember the night Garrett told me. We were sitting at the kitchen table after dinner, and he had that particular expression on his face, the one I'd learned meant he wanted something and was deciding how to frame it. He reached across and put his hand over mine, which should have been my first warning. "She's got nowhere to go, Diane," he said. "She's 70 years old. You know how hard it is to find a place on a fixed income around here." I said I understood that, and I did. "But we have a 2-bedroom condo, Garrett. There's not exactly space." "She's small," he said, which was such a strange thing to say that I almost laughed. We went back and forth on it for 2 weeks. I offered to help him research senior apartments in the next county over. I offered to help her apply for assisted housing. He rejected every suggestion with a new reason. Finally, I thought we'd reached a compromise. Connie would stay with us for no more than 3 months while she sorted out a permanent solution, and she would sleep in the 2nd bedroom, which I used as a home office. I cleared out my desk and my filing cabinet. I moved my work stuff to the kitchen counter. I told myself 3 months was manageable. That was October. By February, Connie was still there, and the 3 months conversation had somehow been rewritten in Garrett's memory as long as she needs. I want to be precise about something. Connie wasn't the villain of this story, not exactly. She was a woman in a difficult situation who had a son willing to advocate aggressively on her behalf. The problem wasn't her. The problem was what Garrett started doing once she was inside my home. Because once Connie was living with us, a shift happened. Subtle at first. He started referring to the condo as our place, in a way that included her in the our. He started making decisions about the shared spaces, rearranging the living room furniture, changing the thermostat setting, deciding we'd switch from cable to a streaming bundle without asking me. And when I'd bring it up, he'd say, "Mom's more comfortable this way," or "Mom needs it warmer, she's got circulation issues." I was being managed. I could feel it happening, but every single piece of it was small enough to dismiss on its own. Then, in early March of our 5th year of marriage, that particular early spring when the dogwood in the courtyard was just starting to bud, when the air still had a bite to it in the mornings, but smelled like something was about to open up, Garrett came home one evening and sat down across from me with that expression again. Except this time, it was different. This time, he wasn't asking. "I've been talking to Denny and Lorraine," he said. Denny was his son. Lorraine was Denny's wife. They lived in Knoxville, about 2 hours east of Clover Ridge. "They're having some trouble," Garrett continued. "Landlord's selling their place too. And with the kids—" "How many kids do they have now?" I asked carefully. I knew the answer. 2, ages 7 and 4. 2, and a baby on the way. He paused. "They need somewhere to land for a while, Diane, just until they can get their feet under them." I stared at him. I counted the people he was describing. Denny, Lorraine, a 7-year-old, a 4-year-old, a pregnant woman in her 3rd trimester, plus Connie, who was already in my 2nd bedroom, plus Garrett, plus me. In a 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath condo. "Garrett," I said very quietly, "that's not possible." And that was when he said the thing that changed everything. Not the thing he said at the door weeks later. That came after. This was something different. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and said, with a patience that made my skin crawl, "You know, Diane, you've always been a little rigid about this space. It's just a condo. It's just walls." Just walls. I had been paying the mortgage on those walls for 7 years. I had repainted every room twice. I had saved for 3 years to redo the kitchen flooring. And now, apparently, I was being rigid. I didn't argue with him that night. I said I needed to think, and I went to bed early, and I lay there in the dark listening to Connie's television through the ceiling. She'd moved her TV into the bedroom and turned the volume up because, Garrett said, she had some hearing loss. And I thought about the dogwood tree in the courtyard, and I thought about my coffee cup at that kitchen window, And I thought about something my sister Paulette had said to me 6 months earlier that I had dismissed entirely at the time. "Diane," Paulette had said, "have you ever actually looked up who's on the deed to that condo?" I had told her that was a ridiculous question. Of course I knew. It was my condo. Lying there in the dark, listening to the muffled laugh track from Connie's television, I realized I had never actually checked. The next morning, before my 7:45 shift at the clinic, I sat at the kitchen counter with my laptop open and pulled up the county property records online. My hands were steady. My coffee was getting cold. The dogwood outside was showing the first thin blush of pink at the tips of its branches. I typed in the address. The record loaded in about 4 seconds, and what I saw on that screen, the names listed there, or more precisely the name that was not listed there, made everything inside me go very, very quiet. Garrett. Quote, "His name wasn't on the deed, only mine was. Diane Ruth Calloway. The address, the parcel number, the date of purchase. 7 years ago when I was 44 and newly single and terrified in the best possible way. Just my name, neat and official, exactly as it should have been." I sat there for a long moment with my coffee going cold and the screen glowing in the early morning kitchen light. My first thought wasn't relief. My first thought was, why did I assume he was on it? And then I started thinking backward, and what I found when I traced that question to its source genuinely unsettled me. About 8 months into our marriage, Garrett had suggested we make things official with the condo, his exact phrasing. He said it casually, like it was the natural next step, like adding a spouse to a property deed was the same as updating your Netflix password. I remembered telling him I'd look into it. I remembered him bringing it up again twice after that. I remembered, and this one landed hard, him saying the third time, "You know, it's actually better for taxes. My buddy Holt went through this with his wife, and having both names on the deed saved them a bundle." I had nodded like that made sense, and then I'd gotten busy, and then I'd forgotten, and apparently so had he, because he never brought it up a fourth time. Or so I'd thought. I went to work that morning and I did my job and I smiled at patients and answered phones and confirmed insurance, and the whole time one part of my brain was running quietly in the background, like a program I hadn't opened on purpose. By the time I got home that evening, I had decided 2 things. First, I needed to talk to someone I trusted completely. Second, I needed to do it before Garrett noticed I was thinking. I called Paulette from my car in the clinic parking lot before I even started the engine. "You were right," I said when she picked up, "about the deed." There was a pause. "Diane. His name's not on it." "Okay." Another pause, longer this time. "And that surprised you?" "The fact that it didn't end up on there, no. But why it didn't, that part is bothering me." Paulette is 4 years older than me and works as a paralegal for a small firm in Nashville. She has been married to the same man for 26 years and has the specific kind of patience that comes from spending decades around legal documents and unreliable people. She didn't say, "I told you so." She said, "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I need to understand what my actual position is," I said, "before anything else happens." "Smart," she said. "Call Marcy." Marcy Tillman was a real estate attorney in Clover Ridge who had helped me close on the condo originally. She was thorough, direct, and had no tolerance for what she called sentimental nonsense in a legal context. I'd always liked her. I called Marcy the next morning. She had a cancellation at noon, and I took it. Her office was on the 2nd floor of a building on Main Street, above a tax preparation service that had been there since before I could remember. She was a short woman in her mid-60s, with reading glasses she wore on a beaded chain and a habit of tapping her pen against her legal pad when she was being precise. She listened to everything I told her, all of it. The condo, the mortgage, the 7 years of payments, the remodel I'd been planning, Connie moving in, Garrett's comments about Denny and Lorraine, the deed check I'd run the morning before. When I finished, she tapped her pen 3 times. "First thing," she said, "Tennessee is not a community property state. It's an equitable distribution state. That means if you were to divorce, the court would look at who owned what going in, what each party contributed, and what's fair. Not just split it down the middle automatically. Okay, I said. The condo was yours before the marriage. It's in your name. That's a significant starting point in your favor. She paused. But, has he made any financial contributions to the property? Mortgage payments, repairs, renovations? I thought about it honestly. The mortgage, no. He'd never contributed to the mortgage. Utilities, sometimes, maybe 40% of the months, and usually only when I said something. Repairs. He'd done some work himself, which as a contractor he'd framed as his contribution, rather than shared expense. But actual cash toward the structure of the place? I didn't think so. What about a remodel? Marcy asked. I told her about the remodel. I had been planning it for over a year. The kitchen flooring had needed replacing for ages, and I'd wanted to redo the hall bathroom, update the fixtures, put in new countertops. I'd been saving for it specifically. $17,000, sitting in a dedicated savings account I'd opened at Clover Ridge Community Bank, in my name only, built up over 3 years of putting away $200 to $300 a month. I told her I was planning to start the work in the next few weeks. Marcy looked at me over her reading glasses. Who's doing the work? I was going to hire someone, I said. Garrett offered to do it, but don't let him do it, she said simply and immediately. If he does the labor himself and later claims that constitutes a marital contribution to the property's value, it complicates your position. Pay a licensed contractor, keep every receipt, document everything. I nodded slowly. You're saying I should be thinking about this in legal terms. I'm saying you came here, which means part of you already is. She set down her pen. I don't know your husband, Diane. I don't know what he intends. But I know that what you've described, the pressure to house his family, the comments about the space being shared, the framing of you as rigid when you push back, that's a pattern worth taking seriously. I drove home with both hands on the wheel and my jaw tight. I didn't say anything to Garrett that night, or the next night. I hired a contractor named Phil. Garrett didn't know. A man named Walt Deering who'd done work for the clinic's office manager and came with solid references, and I scheduled the remodel to start in 2 weeks. I paid the deposit out of my dedicated account, and I kept the receipt in a folder in my car. What I didn't expect was that Garrett would find out about Walt before the work even started. He came home one Thursday evening while I was on the phone with Walt, confirming the material order, and I didn't hear the door. I was standing in the kitchen talking about tile samples, and when I turned around, Garrett was leaning against the doorframe with his arms crossed and an expression I hadn't seen before. Not angry exactly, assessing. Who's that? He said after I hung up. Contractor, I said, for the remodel. I told you I'd handle the remodel. I know, I said. I decided to hire it out. He was quiet for a moment. Then, that's a lot of money to spend on someone else's labor when I could do it for free. It's not free, I said. It's your time. That's what married people do, Diane. They help each other. I know, I said again, and I appreciate it. But I want the work permitted and documented, and Walt is licensed for that. Something moved across his face then, a quick recalibration, like a man adjusting his grip. Permitted, he repeated. You think I'm not good enough to do permitted work? I didn't say that. But that's what you meant. I looked at him. I kept my voice level. I meant I want the paperwork in order, for the value of the property. He let it go. But he didn't let it go the way people let things go when they're satisfied. He let it go the way people let things go when they're filing it away. The remodel took 6 weeks. Walt and his crew were professional and quiet, and I was home as much as I could manage, watching. New countertops in a deep quartz, the color was called Calicotta Pearl, which I had spent 3 Saturdays choosing. New tile in the hall bathroom, small white hexagons on the floor, a pale sage on the walls. New fixtures. The kitchen got new flooring, wide plank luxury vinyl in a warm walnut tone that made the whole room feel bigger and more settled. The dogwood outside was in full bloom by the time they finished, that extravagant pink that always looked almost theatrical, like a stage set for something. I spent $17,400, every penny from my account, every receipt in the folder. And during those 6 weeks, something else was happening that I was only half aware of at the time. Garrett was on the phone more than usual, long calls in the bedroom with the door closed, or outside on the small concrete patio, pacing. When I asked who he was talking to, he said Denny, or he said a client, or he said his buddy Holt. Always a name I couldn't easily check. Then, the week after Walt's crew cleared out, Denny called the house phone. We still had a landline. One of Connie's conditions for feeling comfortable. She said she didn't trust cell service, and I answered. "Hey, Diane," Denny said. He sounded surprised that I'd picked up. Is Dad around?" "He's outside," I said. "Can I help you with something?" No. Just tell him I got the measurements he asked for." I kept my voice perfectly neutral. "Measurements for what?" A beat. "Oh, for the, he'll know." A pause that went 1 second too long. "The storage unit thing, yeah." We hung up. I stood in my newly renovated kitchen with my new Calacatta pearl countertops and my warm walnut floors, and I thought about what measurements Garrett would need from Denny in Knoxville, and what a storage unit had to do with any of it, and why Denny had sounded like a man who had just said something he wasn't supposed to. I went outside. Garrett was on the patio, phone in his hand. He looked up when I opened the door. "Denny called the landline," I said. "I'll call him back." "He said he got you the measurements you asked for." A pause. Garrett put his phone in his shirt pocket. "For the storage unit," he said, easy as anything. I was thinking if Denny and Lorraine do end up coming this way, they could put their furniture in storage instead of hauling everything around. "You're still planning on them coming here?" I said. "I'm planning on options, Diane, that's all." I nodded. I went back inside. I stood at the kitchen window and looked at the dogwood, which had passed its peak now, the blooms going soft at the edges, a few petals loose on the courtyard concrete. The tree was still beautiful, just a little less certain than it had been 2 weeks ago. That night I went into the second bedroom, Connie's room now, to return a cardigan I'd found in the laundry, and Connie was sitting up in bed with the television on low, which was unusual. She normally kept it loud. She looked at me when I came in, and something in her expression shifted in a way I couldn't quite name. "You did a real nice job with the place," she said. "Thank you, Connie." She looked back at the TV. "Shame," she said, so quietly I almost didn't catch it. I stopped. "I'm sorry?" She shook her head. "Nothing, just talking to myself." And she turned the volume up, not loud, but enough. I stood in the hallway outside her door for a long moment. Shame. It was such a specific word. Not what a shame, not that's a shame, just shame. Bare and flat and directed somewhere I couldn't see. I thought about the measurements Denny had taken. I thought about the storage unit that didn't exist yet. I thought about Garrett's hand over mine at the kitchen table months ago, and his patience that had made my skin crawl, and the way he'd said, "It's just walls," like he was trying to loosen something in my grip. And I thought about Marcy Tillman's reading glasses and her pen tapping 3 times, and the folder of receipts in my car, and the name on the county property record that was only and entirely mine. I went to bed. I didn't sleep for a long time, and in the morning I made a call I should have made 6 months earlier. The call I should have made 6 months earlier was to a divorce attorney. Not Marcy. Marcy was real estate, and she'd been clear about her lane. I needed someone who handled the whole picture. Paulette had a name, a woman named Gretchen Fossey, who practiced family law out of a 2-story brick building in Millhaven, the county seat, about 14 miles from Clover Ridge. Paulette had referred 2 people from her paralegal firm to Gretchen over the years and said she was methodical, unsentimental, and good at explaining things to people who were still hoping they were wrong about their situation. I made the appointment for a Thursday afternoon when Garrett had a job consultation in Wartburg, or said he did. I didn't verify it. I had stopped verifying things out loud because every time I asked a clarifying question, I could see him file it somewhere. Gretchen Fossey was younger than I expected. mid-40s, with short, natural hair, and the kind of desk that had 4 things on it and nothing else. She shook my hand, offered me water, and then sat down and said, "Tell me what's happening." So I told her. All of it. The condo, the 7 years of mortgage payments, the remodel, Connie's arrival, and the 3 months that became open-ended, the Denny and Lorraine conversation, the measurements phone call, the word shame from Connie in the dim bedroom, and the thing I hadn't told anyone yet, the feeling that had been building for weeks that I was being slowly repositioned inside my own home. Not thrown out, repositioned. Turned from the owner into a difficult guest who needed to be managed around. Gretchen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked 3 questions. How long had we been married? Almost 5 years. Had Garrett ever been added to any financial accounts, utility accounts, or insurance policies tied to the property? No. I had checked every one of them after the deed. And had he made any documented financial contributions to the condo's purchase price or its recent renovation? No. His labor on minor repairs over the years, but no documented cash. She tapped her fingers once on the desk. "Okay," she said. "Here's what I want you to understand. The condo is yours. Legally, clearly, substantively yours. But what you're describing, the family pressure, the incremental reframing, the way your husband positions your reasonable limits as selfishness, that doesn't concern me from a property standpoint. It concerns me from a safety standpoint, not physical safety necessarily, positional safety. If you let this situation escalate without documentation, you'll win the legal argument and still feel like you lost everything else." "What do I do?" I asked. "You document everything from this point forward," she said. "Every conversation about the property, every request to move additional family members in, every instance where he makes a decision about your home without your input. You write it down with the date and time, and you keep it somewhere he can't access. You also don't change your behavior in any way that signals to him you've had this conversation." "Normal," I said. "Exactly. You stay completely normal." I drove back to Clover Ridge with the windows down, even though it was cool because I needed the air. I needed to feel like I could breathe outside of the car, outside of the condo, outside of the arrangement I had walked into with my eyes open, and then gradually let reshape itself around me, while I stood at a kitchen window looking at a dogwood tree. The worst week came right after that. It started with a Sunday dinner that Garrett organized without telling me he was organizing it. I came home from my shift at the clinic. I'd picked up a Saturday into Sunday stretch to cover for a coworker who'd had a family emergency, and I walked into my freshly renovated kitchen to find Connie at my stove, Garrett setting the table with a tablecloth I didn't recognize, and Denny, Lorraine, and their 2 kids seated in my living room with their shoes off and a pile of children's backpacks stacked against my new vinyl flooring. Lorraine was visibly pregnant, 8 months maybe. She had the slow, careful way of moving that late pregnancy demands, and she was sitting in the corner of the couch with her feet up on my coffee table, which she shifted off quickly when she saw me come in. "Diane," Garrett said, smiling, "you're just in time. Mom made her pot roast." I stood there for 2 full seconds. 2 full seconds is a long time when you're deciding what face to put on. "Great," I said. I set my bag down. I washed my hands at the kitchen sink. I said hello to Denny, who looked at me like a man who was working hard at appearing relaxed, and to Lorraine, who said I looked tired in a way that was probably meant to be sympathetic, and to the 2 kids, who were 7 and 4, and utterly indifferent to the entire adult situation, which I found briefly comforting. Dinner was the longest 2 hours I had spent in years. Garrett was expansive, pouring the sweet tea, laughing at everything Denny said. Connie was warm in a way that felt like a performance of warmth, like she was demonstrating something for an audience. At one point, she reached over and patted my hand and said, "It's so nice to have everyone together." And I said, "It really is." And I meant neither word of it. After dinner, while Lorraine was putting the younger one down on my couch with a travel blanket they'd brought from Knoxville, I heard Garrett and Denny talking in low voices in the hallway. I was rinsing dishes. The water was running. I turned it off without them noticing. "She'll come around," Garrett was saying. "She just needs to see it as normal first." "How long?" Denny said. "Give it a few more weeks." A few more weeks. I turned the water back on. I finished rinsing the dishes. I dried my hands on the kitchen towel that Connie had replaced with one of her own, a cream-colored one with a little embroidered rooster on it, which had appeared one morning about 3 weeks after she moved in, and which I had never said a word about. I folded it and hung it back on the oven handle exactly the way I always did, and I went to bed before anyone else was ready to leave. I lay there listening to Denny and Garrett talking in the living room, to the television Connie had turned on in the second bedroom, to the sound of Lorraine's voice reading something softly to the 4-year-old. My house was full of people I had not invited, and the man sleeping next to me, who would come to bed in an hour and put his arm across my shoulders like everything was fine, had just told his son, "She'll come around." Come around to what? The idea that my home was a communal property that his entire family had a claim to. The idea that my objections were just a phase he needed to manage. I thought about the folder of receipts in my car. I thought about Gretchen Fosse's desk with 4 things on it. I thought about Marcy Tillman tapping her pen, and I thought about something I had not let myself think clearly until that exact moment, lying in the dark listening to my house breathe with other people's lives. He was planning to move them in. Not as a conversation, not as a request. He was planning to present it as a done thing, the way Connie's 3 months had become open-ended, incrementally, with each step small enough to argue away, until one day I looked up and the whole landscape had changed, and the moment to object had somehow already passed. That was the bottom. Right there, in that dark room, listening to voices that had no right to be that comfortable in my space. That was the lowest I went. Not the anger, not the grief, but the nauseating clarity of understanding exactly what was being done and realizing how long I had let it build. I got up at 5:30, before anyone else was awake. I made coffee quietly. I sat at my kitchen window with my oat milk and my mug, and I looked at the dogwood, which had gone fully green now, the blooms entirely gone, just leaves in the gray early morning light. And I decided that if Garrett wanted to manage me, then for the next few weeks I was going to be the most manageable version of myself he had ever seen. Easy, agreeable, unbothered. I was going to smile at every dinner and fold every dish towel and say nothing that could be filed away, because I had an appointment with Gretchen Fosse the following Tuesday to begin the paperwork. And I had called Paulette the previous week, and Paulette had called a woman she knew at Clover Ridge Community Bank, not a teller, but a loan officer named Cherie, who had been doing mortgages in this county for 19 years. And Cherie had confirmed something for me quietly and as a personal favor, not as an official transaction. She confirmed that no one had ever inquired about refinancing my mortgage or adding a co-borrower to my account. Not officially. But she said, with the careful tone of someone choosing their words, that she had received what she described as a general inquiry, not tied to any account, just asking about the process, about 2 months prior. From a man who had not given his name. I thought about that general inquiry. I thought about the timing, 2 months ago, right around when Walt's crew was finishing the renovation, right around when the condo had gone from a modest unit to something demonstrably more valuable. And I thought about what a man who was quietly researching how to add himself to a mortgage might be building toward. Denny's family drove back to Knoxville that Sunday evening. Garrett walked them out to their car, and through the kitchen window I watched him hug Lorraine carefully around her pregnancy, clap Denny on the shoulder twice, crouch down, and say something to the 7-year-old that made the kid laugh. He looked like a good father. He looked like a man doing right by his family. He came back inside and found me at the counter with a glass of water, and he said, "Good night, right?" "Really nice," I said. He kissed the top of my head. "I knew you'd warm up to the idea." I took a sip of my water. "What idea is that?" "Having everyone close." He said it casually, like it was already settled. "It's good for families to be in the same place." I set my glass down. I smiled at him. "You know what, Garrett? I think you might be right." He looked at me for just a half-second longer than natural, the smallest flicker of something that might have been surprise or might have been satisfaction, and then he smiled back and said he was going to watch something in the bedroom. I waited until I heard the television click on. Then I went to my car, got the folder of receipts out of the glove compartment, brought it inside, and put it in the bottom of the hanging file box I kept in my work bag. Then I sat back down at the kitchen counter and opened my laptop and started an email to Gretchen Fossey with a subject line that said, "Tuesday, additional documentation to discuss." My hands were completely steady. The kitchen was quiet. Outside, the dogwood stood in the dark, all green and still, holding its shape in the way that trees do when everything around them has already changed and they simply haven't moved yet. I hit send. And then I heard Garrett's voice from the bedroom, not the television, his actual voice, low and distinct, saying something I could only half make out. I caught one word clearly. One word, and it was enough. The word was Thursday. I closed the laptop. I sat very still. Because Thursday was the day Denny and Lorraine had told Garrett their lease in Knoxville was officially up. Thursday came faster than I expected. I know that sounds strange. I've been watching the calendar for 2 weeks, counting down in the back of my mind. But when I woke up that morning and the light was doing that particular flat gray thing it does in early May before the sun gets high enough to matter, something about the finality of the day hit me all at once. This was it. Denny and Lorraine's lease in Knoxville was officially up. They had nowhere to go except wherever Garrett had told them to go, and I already knew where that was. I had been ready for 4 days. Gretchen Fossey had filed the divorce petition the previous Friday. Under Tennessee law, the papers wouldn't be served until a process server made contact, and I had asked Gretchen to hold on the service. Not indefinitely, just long enough. Just until Thursday. She'd understood without me needing to explain more than once. That was the thing about Gretchen. She didn't need things explained twice. I got up at 6 and made coffee and stood at my kitchen window in the quiet. The dogwood was full green now, past its drama, settled into the ordinary business of being a tree. I thought about how much I had looked at that tree over 7 years, how many mornings I had stood exactly here, in this exact spot, with a mug in both hands, using that tree as a kind of anchor. I thought about how I was going to miss this window. Then I stopped myself, because I wasn't going anywhere. The condo was mine. I had $17,400 in documented receipts and a property deed with one name on it, and that name was Diane Ruth Calloway, and I was not going anywhere. I called Paulette at 7:15. "Today," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm already in the car." Paulette drove 2 hours from Nashville without being asked. That's the kind of sister she is. She arrived at my condo at 9:40, parked on the street, and came inside with a travel mug and the particular expression she gets when she's prepared for something unpleasant and isn't going to flinch. Garrett was still asleep. Connie was moving around in the second bedroom. I could hear the particular creak of the floorboard by her closet, which I had learned to identify over the months. I poured Paulette a cup of coffee, and we sat at the kitchen counter and didn't talk much, because there wasn't much left to say. We'd said all of it on the phone over the past 3 weeks. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Garrett came out of the bedroom at 10:20. He stopped when he saw Paulette. "Paulette," he said, not unfriendly, but calibrating. "Garrett," she said back, with a smile that gave him nothing. He looked between us. "Didn't know you were coming up." "Surprise visit," Paulette said pleasantly. He poured himself coffee and leaned against the counter, and I watched him decide that this was fine, that Paulette being here was manageable, that whatever this was, he could work around it. That was Garrett's default mode: assess, adapt, proceed. I had watched him do it for almost 5 years. I knew the look. Denny's truck pulled into the parking lot at 11:50. I saw it from the window, a gray F-150 with a trailer hitched to the back, loaded with furniture, boxes, a rolled-up rug, what looked like a disassembled bed frame. Lorraine was in the passenger seat. I could see the shape of her through the windshield, that late pregnancy posture, one hand resting on the door. Garrett saw it too. He straightened up from the counter. He set down his mug. And then he did the thing I had been waiting for. He walked to the front door of my freshly renovated condo, opened it wide, and called out across the parking lot, "Hey, you made it!" Then he turned back inside, reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a key. My key. The copy he'd had made 8 months ago without telling me, the one I'd discovered was missing from my hook by the door, and then reappeared 2 days later without explanation. He'd had it copied. I had known that for 3 weeks, since the locksmith on Route 9, a man named Gerald who had been cutting keys in this county since before I got here, had quietly confirmed to Paulette's contact that yes, someone matching Garrett's description had brought in a key matching my unit's lock back in September. Garrett tossed the key across the kitchen. Connie had appeared in the hallway, drawn by the sound of Denny's truck, and she caught it with both hands and looked at it with the expression of a woman who had been waiting for this moment too. "There's room for everyone," Garrett said, spreading his arms wide like he was revealing something magnificent. "Don't be so greedy, Diane." And I smiled. I smiled the way I had been practicing smiling for 3 weeks, not the tight, controlled smile of someone holding back anger, but the open, relaxed smile of a woman who has just gotten exactly what she needed. Because those words, "Don't be so greedy, Diane," were the ones I had told Gretchen about, the ones I had described to her as the likely script, the framing of my legal ownership as selfishness, the repositioning of me as the unreasonable party in my own home. I needed him to say it out loud, with a witness present. "Actually," I said, still smiling, "I want to introduce everyone to someone." I nodded toward the hallway. Paulette stepped aside, and the man who had been waiting in my second bedroom, now empty of Connie's things, because Connie had quietly moved her essentials to the living room over the past week without understanding why I'd asked her to, walked out into the kitchen. His name was Dale Whitfield. He was a process server, and he had driven up from Millhaven that morning. He was a compact man in a gray jacket with a folder under his arm and the practiced neutrality of someone who did this for a living. He looked at Garrett with the same expression he probably used every time, informational, not unkind. "Garrett Allen Holloway?" Dale said. Garrett's arms came down from their wide spread, slowly. "You are hereby served," Dale said, and held out the folder. The room went very quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the refrigerator hum and the sound of Denny's truck engine ticking down in the parking lot outside. Garrett did not take the folder immediately. He stood there for 3 full seconds looking at it, and I watched his face go through 4 different things in quick succession: confusion, then recognition, then a flash of something hot and quick, then nothing. Just flat. He took the folder. "What is this?" he said. It wasn't really a question. "Divorce petition," Dale said, "filed in Clover Ridge County Family Court this past Friday. You'll find the hearing date on the 2nd page." Garrett looked at me. I had stopped smiling, not because I was angry, but because the moment didn't call for it anymore. I just looked back at him, steady. "Diane," he said. "The condo is in my name," I said. "It has been since I bought it 7 years ago. You were never on the deed and you were never on the mortgage, and every payment, every repair, every dollar of the renovation, all of it is documented. I have the receipts." I paused. "I also have a recording of you telling Denny she'll come around, give it a few more weeks." That was from a Sunday dinner in April. My phone was on the counter. His jaw moved. Nothing came out. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said, and I meant it. I had spent a long time deciding whether I meant it, and I did. "I'm doing this because you were going to move your son's pregnant wife and 2 children into my home without my consent, and then tell me I was being rigid about it. And I think we both know that's true." Denny appeared in the doorway then. He must have come in from outside without any of us noticing. He was holding one of the moving boxes from the trailer. He looked at Dale. He looked at the folder in his father's hand. He set the box down on the floor very carefully, like setting down something fragile. "Dad?" he said, quietly. Garrett didn't look at him. He was still looking at me. "Where am I supposed to go?" he said, and something in his voice had changed. The management was gone, the calibration was gone, and what was underneath it was just a tired man in his late 50s asking a genuine question. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "That's something you'll need to figure out," I said. "Gretchen Fosse's number is in the paperwork. She recommends you get your own attorney before the hearing." The hearing, as it turned out, took 4 months. That's how these things go. There were 2 sessions, one preliminary and one final, and Garrett did get an attorney, a man from Wartburg who specialized in family law and who, according to Gretchen, spent about 40 minutes reviewing the documentation before advising Garrett that his position regarding the property was extremely limited. No deed, no mortgage contributions, no documented financial investment in the renovation, a marriage of under 5 years. Tennessee's equitable distribution standard was not going to help him. He contested it anyway because that's what people do when they're not ready to accept what the documents say. He claimed that his labor contributions, the faucet he'd fixed, the caulking he'd redone in the shower, the minor repairs over the years, constituted marital investment in the property. His attorney argued this for approximately 1 hearing. The judge reviewed the documentation of what licensed contractor Walt Deering had done, noted that the renovation's value was entirely captured in receipts paid from my sole account, and found that Garrett's informal labor did not constitute an equitable claim to the property. The condo remained mine. Connie moved to an assisted living community in the next county over, one that Paulette had actually helped research. There was a waiting list, but she'd gotten on it back in March, quietly, through a social worker contact Paulette had from her firm. It wasn't charity. Connie had a small pension and Social Security, and, as it turned out, a decent amount in savings that she had never mentioned during all those months of Garrett presenting her as financially desperate. I don't know if she knew what her son was doing. I still don't know that. But she called me once, 3 weeks after the hearing, from her new room. She said the food was decent and they had a garden she could sit in. She didn't apologize. But she said, "You were always fair to me, Diane." And I said, "Thank you, Connie." And we hung up. And that was the last time we spoke. Denny and Lorraine found an apartment in Knoxville, a real one, that they rented themselves, with their own names on the lease. The baby was born 6 weeks after the hearing, a girl. I know this only because Garrett mentioned it in a text he sent me in September, one of 3 texts he sent over the following months that I read and did not reply to. Not out of cruelty, just because there was nothing to say that hadn't already been said inside a courtroom with documentation. Garrett moved into a rental in Wartburg after the divorce was finalized. I don't know much about his life there. I don't need to. What I know about my life is this. I still work at the clinic on the east side of Clover Ridge. I still make my coffee in the morning with oat milk. I still stand at the kitchen window and look at the dogwood tree in the courtyard, which has gone through one more full cycle since all of this. Bare in winter, pink in spring, green through the long summer, dropping leaves through the fall, and is currently showing the first tight buds of what will be another extravagant bloom. The Calicotta pearl countertops have held up beautifully. The warm walnut floor still makes the kitchen feel bigger than it is. The hall bathroom with its white hex tile is the nicest room in the condo, and I use it every day. And every time I do, I think about the folder of receipts that sat in my glove compartment for 6 weeks, and the calm that came over me the morning I looked at a county property record and found only my name. Paulette came back for Thanksgiving. We cooked in my kitchen, her green bean casserole, my sweet potato pie, a turkey that took 4 hours and was absolutely worth it, and we sat at my kitchen table and ate until we were unreasonable about it. And she said, "You know what's funny? Garrett thought the remodel made you vulnerable. He thought you'd spent all that money and now you had more to lose." He wasn't wrong that I had more to lose, I said, but he was wrong about what it meant.